Good day, fellow champions of inclusion. I'm Aaron, and this is the Inclusive Dad podcast, where we explore inclusion and make it practical. Thank you for taking time out of your busy schedule to join me in exploring ways we can create a more inclusive world together. You are important, you matter, and you can make a difference. Today, my guest is Hilary Hodge. Welcome to the show.
Thanks, Aaron.
Yeah. Why don't you just start us off by telling us a little bit about yourself?
Sure. So I'm a mom with two chronic health conditions. I have severe asthma, excuse me, and Addison's disease. Before my son turned 3, I'd been in the hospital 5 times. So I realized that I needed tips for how to talk to him about my condition, about hospitalizations, but I couldn't find a book on it at all. I could find books on parents with terminal conditions or cancer, which obviously is much more serious and difficult. But in terms of the hundreds of millions of parents with chronic conditions like lupus and rheumatoid arthritis and Graves' disease and so on, that can cause flare-ups, hospitalizations, medical emergencies, and so on, there was just nothing. So I decided to write that book, and that took me on a journey that I hadn't expected, but that has been wonderful, of meeting and working with so many parents. And I'm just really delighted to have found myself in this space.
Can you maybe what is it, like, the definition of what a chronic condition or chronic illness is? Is there like certain criteria?
Sure. And I think I'm like you. I think I have a passion for being as inclusive as possible. So
Yeah.
my overall definition would honestly be anyone that thinks it applies to them, because I just feel like it's a giant tent and anyone that wants to be in there can. The working definition that I have in the book is any condition that lasts a year or longer, is typically lifelong and requires ongoing medical attention. Something that interferes with daily activities, so socializing, seeing friends, working, attending your child's events, running errands, things like that. Something that might be worsening over time, something that might have been in remission but has come back, something that condition that causes frequent and unpredictable hospitalizations or surgeries, and that requires you to take any kind of medication or receive a procedure like dialysis in order to survive.
Sure.
The reason that I say big tent is because I also think that could include, if people with sensory disabilities, for example, wanted to feel included there, absolutely could, even if those don't exactly apply to them. And then I'm also very sensitive to the fact that the average person takes about 4.5 years, if not longer, to get diagnosed if they have an autoimmune condition, more than 6 years for a genetic condition. So I feel like there's an awful lot of people out there in that purgatory who maybe are having symptoms but don't know why. So that's what I meant when I said I feel like the tent is big.
Yeah, thank you for that. What is your definition of inclusion?
So over 1 billion people around the world have chronic conditions. And in the States and in a lot of countries, about 50% of people do. 25% of people have 2. Some of those conditions, like high blood pressure, don't interfere very much with their lives, but other ones, like the list that I just gave you, plus, ALS, cystic fibrosis, depression, endometriosis, myasthenia gravis. I mean, so many other conditions are very difficult to manage, can be hard on families, can be hard on partners, hard on kids. So my definition for inclusion is very specific. I wanted to be specific for you in your podcast because I feel like this is my little area. So inclusion for me is that parents feel seen, because so much of this is invisible. So many of these struggles, the difficult doctor's visits, like I said, the waiting time for diagnosis, all of the fear and the guilt and the grief that parents have about not being the kind of parent that they wanted to be or imagined they would be. I just like them to feel seen. I like them to feel supported with tons of age-appropriate tools and scripts, and to find solidarity in a global community. Because what I have realized in talking to so many parents with every condition under the sun is they say almost the same things verbatim, but I don't think they realize that that's true. And sometimes I think parents can feel so isolated. So I really love helping them find their stories in people in another country with a completely different condition and to see themselves in them.
Like in your situation, did you share with many people that you did have a chronic condition, or was that something you kind of didn't want to talk about in public?
It's a good question. I used to keep it very quiet until this project. I decided this is who I am now, so I'm just going to be loud about it. But
yeah, kind of. I mean, I don't know if this has ever come up, but when you were talking about this, I've seen like I don't know if it was a video where it was a person with a disability. I mean, I feel like it was decades ago, but they had their child taken away from them because the system viewed them as a person with a disability wouldn't be able to take care of their child adequately. Is there any fear of parents with chronic conditions that they might, I mean, the system might see them as not being able to take care of their children?
I think that's a very insightful question, and one that I would not have had a good answer to a few weeks ago. But I
Okay.
just read this terrific book by Jessica Slice called Unfit Parent that's largely about your exact question. And I was shocked by her stories of exactly what you said. Her stories tend to focus on people with sensory disabilities or mental disabilities. But the likelihood of social services being called on those parents is significantly higher than able-bodied parents. And she told this one story that really stuck with me. I think for any parents who are listening, any mothers who have breastfed, she told the story of a blind mother in the hospital who was having a hard time getting her baby to latch right after birth, which almost every mother knows. I mean, anyone who's breastfed knows is one of the most common things that can happen.
Right. Yep.
But because she was blind, the nurses called social services because they were worried she would not be able to care for her child. And I just thought that was shocking because I would imagine that's a problem that 70% of women in the hospital have. So it's a great question. Yeah. And yes, it does happen.
Yeah, it's interesting. Yeah, this one was more I can't remember exactly what it was, but she had more physical, or I don't remember what her diagnosis was, but I mean, she was able to like do the things for her child, but it was very sad. Like hearing the stories, like, holy cow. But like you're saying, in that situation where it's something that happens to, I mean, women with or without disabilities, and because she has a disability, they look at it differently. It's kind of disturbing. Yeah.
Absolutely. I think people with chronic health conditions, because they're invisible, sometimes slide under that radar.
Yeah. Okay. For sure. What is the main misperception parents with a chronic condition have?
I would say that one of the number one things parents say when I talk to them is how guilty they feel that they're not good enough. And then in the very next breath, they'll tell me all of the most incredible things that they're doing for their child. And I think that what I have realized is some of the best parents I've ever talked to have been the parents I've interviewed and worked with. And so I think flipping that on its head and helping parents realize, you might be giving your child gifts you don't even realize, being at home with them more often, doing all of these quality activities at home. Any time that they're spending with family members and friends, I mean, you probably know this because of your work, the number of places a child feels a sense of belonging is directly correlated with their self-esteem. So parents who might feel guilty because their child's going over to their neighbor's house or to siblings or grandparents' house more often, as long as they're having a good time and someone affectionate is taking care of them, it's actually really healthy for them.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense to me. So I have two children. My son, he was kind of on the gifted side, and then my daughter Cecilia, at 3 months, we found out she had epilepsy and later cerebral palsy, and just didn't know anything about that world. But a lot of it was just real coming to the understanding, like the things that I had in my brain about being a parent or having a child look like, which is based on me growing up, I guess. Mainly, some of this stuff isn't going to happen, and just kind of working through that, and
Mhm.
eventually realizing, like, now it's to, I mean, she's 22, so it's just like, our life doesn't look like I thought it was going to back then, but pretty much none of my life looked like it was going to. I mean, not just the parenting part, but just different jobs and the whole thing. So it's interesting how we have these preconceived ideas of what life's going to look like, and something happens, and then you kind of work through it. But it's, at the time it's tricky, but now it's just, yeah. We had a wedding over the weekend, and it was my sister, so my nephew and my sister, made sure that the place was accessible and had that all figured out. And then my daughter, she decided not to go to it, but I mean, that's her choice, and we still have to do the things to make sure it's, she can get there, and then that's kind of up to her. But still working. She's still 20, she's 22, and there's still things where you have to figure it out. So
Oh, you
interesting.
sound like such a wonderful dad. I have a question for you as someone who is an
Go for it.
IEP coach. Is this something that you encounter as well? Is parents who are just doing everything under the sun and are such amazing parents, but still feel guilty somehow?
Yeah. I mean, I feel like that's accurate. I mean, it's still, yeah, I mean, yeah, for sure. I mean, some of it is you just can't, for me, there's stuff in the way the world's built, that's just, the system is built in a way that puts barriers in front of, for my daughter, and it's just like, I want them gone. I feel, I feel guilty. I can't fix everything, but I have to realize I can't. I mean, these are systemic issues that I can't myself fix, or I want it fixed like right now, and it's gonna take years, if ever, to get fixed. So it's just, there is a lot of, yeah. I mean, I want it to be perfect, and it can't be. So for sure, it's definitely a thing.
Yeah. Parents can
That,
really beat themselves up.
yeah, yeah, for sure. What are three of the main concerns parents with a chronic condition have?
I think I've touched on a few. I mean,
Okay.
really, this big central one is just worrying that they're not going to be a good enough parent, that they might have to miss some of their kids' activities, that they can't, maybe physically, if they're unwell or in a bad flare up, can't go to a museum or to see a movie with their child like their child wants to. I think a lot of parents, even who have conditions that have an average lifespan, are privately very worried about something bad happening. And um, something I find to be, again, one of those verbatim statements across parents is hoping they make it to their child's high school graduation. Excuse me. The third would be around, can I pause for a second? I'm really sorry. I
You're
have
fine.
something in my throat. Well, you can edit that out. Sorry.
Sure, you're fine.
Um, okay, I'll keep going. And the third thing would be, I think, worrying about how it impacts their partner or their family members, anyone who's helping them raise their child.
Mhm.
So that's why I do a lot of work around just very clear communicating and coming up with self-care plans for both the person and their partner to ensure that they have a plan in place for when there are flare-ups, when one person can do more than the other, that there's guidelines. I mean, it's all pretty common sense, but without a framework, it doesn't always occur
Mhm.
to people.
Yeah.
So for example, when I talk about guidelines, I mean parents who have any kind of medication that makes them immunocompromised, which is a lot of different kinds of
Mhm.
medications. Their kids just need to wash their hands every time they come in the house. They can't bring over sick friends. And that seems obvious, but it can be helpful to brainstorm those rules together as a family, to put them on the wall, and so on. So
Yeah.
yeah, but the underlying theme, I think, of all of those is just guilt and worry.
Yeah. Or do you have a hard time asking for help from people?
Again, this project has helped me so much because I thought your question earlier was interesting. Did I used to talk about this? And I think that I didn't, because, like a lot of people, it can be tricky when your friends and family don't understand,
Mhm.
or when they try to tell you to, drink celery juice, or to go see their friend's integrationist doctor. And
Yep.
they just kind of are always trying to find ways to cure you instead of just
Yep.
listening to you.
Mhm.
The disease that I have, Addison's disease, is caused by my adrenal glands no longer work, so I don't make cortisol. But because there's so much social media misinformation around cortisol, and it's kind of been vilified, and people think it's this bad thing, when if you don't have it in your body, you'll die within a day. I mean, I feel like I'm also having to overcome misinformation, and, so
Sure.
I did used to keep it to myself. But I think it's hard to ask for help if you don't tell people,
Yeah.
And so as I worked on the book, I did realize how important it is to involve neighbors and friends and family, and to let them know if there is a chance that you might have some kind of medical emergency, so that you can have a backup plan in place.
Right. Yep.
And also to come up with a script for how to talk to people about it. Because, for example, like, let's say there's a parent with lupus who's in a bad flare-up. They might just briefly explain it to their kids' best friend's parents, and say, look,
Yep.
could you take them to the playground this week? I'll pack up all the snacks. If you can do that for 2 hours, in a few weeks when I'm feeling better, you can send your kid over, and I'll take them for a couple hours, and we'll do a movie afternoon or something
Yep.
like that. So the asking for help can be really small. And I think realizing that helped me see that it can be a give and take. It doesn't have to just be asking for help, if that makes sense.
Yeah. Yeah, that makes sense. For sure. With chronic conditions, is there with disability, sometimes it seems like people just don't want to talk about it because, if I don't know, I'm not sure if we're scared or just don't know what to ask. Do you see some stuff similar with chronic conditions where people just kind of don't want to talk about it, or just kind of avoid the conversation? Like, if you don't have one, let's say, like you're um
Yeah.
because like for my daughter's in a wheelchair. Sometimes, kids will come up and start climbing and ask questions. Then sometimes parents are like, no, don't do that. Don't talk, ask questions. So it seems like there's this uncomfortableness of, well, should we ask a question? Should we not? Is there something similar with like chronic conditions?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think a lot of people have coping mechanisms up, a kind of denial of wanting to think that they're ever going to get sick or anything
Yeah,
bad's going to
for sure.
happen. I think in the United States in particular, we have a real obsession with productivity. I've always
Yes.
found it interesting that malingering there's only a word for work. Someone who pretends to be sick so that they don't have to work. There's no one who pretends to be sick to get out of family obligations or
Right.
friend. I mean, and so I think sometimes it can be on the unconscious level, this
Yes.
fear of being unproductive, and what would happen if I got sick and couldn't care for my family. I think
Yep.
it can trigger a lot of things in other people that bring out in them stuff that has nothing to do with you. Like if someone says, oh, I have Ehlers-Danlos and fibromyalgia, maybe they might have an uncle that says, I've never heard of that. I there's all these new illnesses these days. But they wouldn't have that same reaction if you said, I'm from such and such small town in Minnesota. They wouldn't say, well, that town doesn't exist. I've never heard of it. So I really think when people have reactions like that, it has much more to do with them, if that makes
Yeah,
sense.
for sure. No, that makes complete sense. Yeah, I think it's just, like you're saying, even around like the disability stuff, it's like, if you look at the stats, if you live to be just the average life expectancy, there's a pretty good chance you're gonna have at least a short-term disability. If you live to like 90 or 100, it's pretty much guaranteed you're gonna have something. So it's just, we don't want to talk about it because we don't want to see ourselves in that spot, I think. So that makes a lot of sense for sure. How has writing this book made you a better parent?
Oh, so many ways. It's really helped me relax. It's helped me just realize that everything I've already said, I can be such a great parent from the couch. I have one chapter that has 100 ideas of activities to do at home for different ages. And
Sure.
just brainstorming those has been super helpful to me, and having those in my back pocket. I think connecting with so many other parents and building a community for myself has been really terrific, to get ideas from those parents as well. I think thinking through some of my biggest fears around parenting. I have a real fear of ever being upset or mad. I'm a very mellow parent and I'm a very mellow person, but every once in a while I'll get upset, especially if I'm not feeling well. And I found some great exercises around, anger and where it comes from and what parents can do. And also just being empathetic to the fact that a lot of parents are on medications like steroids that can increase how reactive you are, and just ways to de-escalate very quickly and to deal with difficult emotions around grief and anger. So I think it really runs the gamut, but it's definitely made me a better parent.
Yeah, you've mentioned scripts a few times. Do you want to talk a little bit about the scripts that you help or have come up with that help parents like talk about this stuff with their child or with others, or what that
Sure.
looks like?
Sure. I have tons throughout because I feel like it's so helpful to see examples, but most of them are built around the same core concept, which is it's good to just weave information throughout the family life and to talk about it so that it becomes boring and normal instead of avoiding talking about it. So telling your kids about any kind of flare-ups, doctor's appointments, if it's a heritable condition, I have scripts for that. But my overall point that underpins all of it is to always pair information with reassurance. So if you just give kids information, they might get freaked out. Like, oh, I have this new disease. It's called this. Don't worry. It's fine. If you just give them reassurance, oh, this disease is so common. My doctor's great. Then they don't really have the full picture and they might go online and freak themselves out looking at incorrect information. So in terms of telling kids about new diagnoses, a new comorbidity, a worsening of a condition, a flare-up, the basic steps are just to say, what's going on, what the treatment is that you're getting, if anything is going to change, what you need from them, and then to tell them you're taking care of it with your doctors, and the best thing they can do is live their lives. When I say reassurance, examples of that are if you're saying, for example, I've been diagnosed with diabetes type 1, which actually does happen quite a bit in people's 30s. I'm going to start taking insulin. 100 million people take it around the world. This is the only thing my doctor does for a living. Those are examples of things that help kids feel like, okay, they're in good hands. This is not some thing that's only happening to my parent.
Yeah, for sure. So did you have your chronic condition before you moved to France?
So I had asthma, like many people throughout most of my adult life with moderate asthma. I was fine for the most part, as long as I managed my triggers. And then in my early 30s, it turned into what they call severe asthma. It just means asthma that stops responding to medication. Happens to about 8 to 10% of asthmatics. And so that in turn, all the medications that I took for that caused my adrenal glands to fail, which is why I then developed a secondary disease. So that happened when I was 39, so about 6 years ago.
Okay. Yeah, I'm just kind of curious, and since you live in a different country, like how the health systems compare, or like way different, similar, better one place than the other?
It's a good question. I should establish that for people. I'm American, but I'm in France. I'm in the Loire Valley. I'm very spoiled, and the healthcare here is fantastic. It's excellent. It's very affordable. Medications are affordable. I love the platforms for booking doctors online, being able to very easily email with them. All my doctors are in communication. It's just a little different than the States in that way. But there is a condition longue durée here, which is basically long-term condition, but it's treated very differently than in the United States, which I think is something that our country could learn from. When I say our country, I mean the States, in the sense that when with a condition like the Addisons, where my adrenals no longer work, I get support from nutritionists, and the endocrinologist recommends, different kinds of hormonal supplements and things that that kind of support isn't always given in other countries. So I do feel very lucky to be managing that here.
Thank you for that. How did you find parents that you feature in your book?
That's a good question. I reached out to a lot of foundations. I've partnered with about 20 foundations so far to find parents because I wanted to make sure that I was talking to people that are already comfortable being ambassadors in their role,
Yep,
and
yep,
are comfortable with people knowing about their conditions, that it won't affect their jobs or communities. I have spoken with some parents who didn't want to be featured, but did want to give me ideas and
yep.
information because they actually keep their conditions pretty private. As one person I talked to said, um, the ADA may exist, but not necessarily in my boss's head. Like if they know
Yep.
that I want to get a promotion, but they also know I have this condition, I can't stop that from influencing their thinking. And I thought that was an interesting way to put it. So I'm very protective of everybody. So I did try to work with people that are already in the public eye.
Yeah. And the parents are from all different countries around the world, or?
Yes, yeah, that was important to
Awesome.
me. I've got
That's cool.
Canada, United States, France, Turkey, the UK, India, the
Wow,
whole, yes, a bunch. Yeah.
that's awesome. That's awesome. How has writing this book helped you build a new community of other parents with chronic conditions?
Well, something that's been really great is foundations have started to reach out to me to offer training. So working
Mm,
with people with a lot of different kinds of conditions. I started with just my own asthma and Addison's, and I've branched out from that. So that's been wonderful. I put together a survey that a lot of parents have shared on different support groups. So I've heard from a lot of parents that way as well, which has been really great. And I did find by putting on LinkedIn at one point that I was looking for parents to interview.
mhm.
That's what's so nice about your networks. Sometimes you
Yeah,
hear from people you haven't seen or talked to in years, and that happened in this case. I reconnected with some really lovely people that I wound up featuring in the book, who I hadn't talked to in years, and that's been really great.
that's awesome. What is one tip you can share to help the listeners be more inclusive today? So just something anybody can start doing today to be more inclusive.
Um, let's see. I think basically what I said, which is to see yourself as part of a massive global community. I had this image a few months ago that these parents feel like they're in a kayak, but it's like seeing a sea of 1 billion people in kayaks.
Mhm.
You're not alone. And there are hundreds of millions of other people in the same situation. So I think seeking out other parents through school, through church, through whatever networks you have, where either the child or the parents have a condition, can be an enormously fruitful way to build a support network where, and you can probably testify
Yeah.
to this with your own experience. If, for example, there is a parent who has, let's say Crohn's disease, and they know of a family at the school with a child that has an anaphylactic allergy, they could reach out to them and say, hey, do you want to have a picnic? We
Right.
are so used to being so cautious about our food.
Right.
Nothing
Right.
that you could ask or request would bug us at all. We can all just be hyper careful.
Yep.
I think being deliberate that way is a really great way to build an inclusive community.
Yeah, that's great. When Cece was younger, we did a lot of stuff with the Epilepsy Foundation in Minnesota. So that was a great community of other families that were in similar to us. And it just was a nice place for us to you could show up. We didn't have to explain our story for the 150th time. And we just showed up and had fun together. And it was like I said, a nice place because at that time she was having a lot of seizures. So every time
Mm,
we'd go somewhere, like had to give the whole story, and it was just
yeah,
one nice place you could go and just show up and not have to explain it over and over again.
exactly.
So yeah,
Exactly. Everybody understands.
yeah,
Everybody's
yep,
welcome.
yeah. I'm old enough. Cheers, the old show, where you show up and everybody knows your name and they're glad you came.
Exactly.
Do you want to talk? Where's the best place to connect with you, and where can people find your book?
Sure. The book's still in development. I'm
Okay.
still getting lots of great parent stories. First draft is done, but my website is just my name, hilaryhodge.net. And then my Instagram is just my name too, Hilary Hodge. But I have lots of resources and I'm adding more to those all the time. Okay. Just free resources for parents on things like how to teach your kids to call 911, how to talk about a heritable condition, and so on. Because I really just want parents to have as many resources as possible to help them navigate.
Awesome. That's great. I'll make sure I put your website in the show notes. You ready for the last question?
Sure.
You like Spam lunch meat, yes or no?
No.
No.
I don't think we can even get that here.
Don't think so. Or, I don't know about France. I know in Britain they eat it.
Oh, really? We have a very similar thing here called Hamth.
Okay. Yeah, because there was so I live near Austin, Minnesota, where they make Spam and where the Spam Museum's located. And in the Spam Museum, there's a whole display. There was a couple from Britain who came over to the Spam Museum and got married there because I like it so much. Yeah. Thank you. Well, thank you so much for being on the show today.
Thank you. It was a pleasure.
To those listening, thank you for allowing me to be part of your journey. It is truly an honor. Please join the podcast newsletter by clicking on the link in the episode description to keep up with the latest episodes. Together, we can make the world more inclusive. Until next time, stay empowered and be a champion for inclusion.